get up on the computer. I apologize for the long wait for technical issues. Jerry, do you want to begin and confirm that we've begun the streaming?
You're ready to go?
Great. Welcome, everyone, to the Standards and Assessment Committee meeting for the Utah Board of Education. I'm Randy Booth. I'll be serving as chair this year of this committee, and we're delighted to welcome those from the public, and certainly every member of the committee is most welcome. I would like to begin today with an opportunity to just get to know one another a little bit better, and particularly to give our board members an opportunity to get to know the staff with whom we're privileged to work in this committee. So I'd like to begin with Deputy Superintendent Patty Norman, and then invite her to introduce each of the primary staff members and allow them to give us a little background on their education, their work experience, and their current responsibilities in the agency. Patty?
Yes, thank you, Chair Booth. It looks like we have all board members on now, or all committee members on now, so that's exciting. We all got here, and our technology is almost all ready, so that's awesome. So I'm Patty Norman. I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Student Achievement. In that role, I'm the primary staff to this committee, but there we have lots of primary staff to this committee to help support it. My role at USBE is that I support the area of programs. And student achievement in my role is divided up into two major sections, and the two major sections support all of the programs. And I'll have our two assistant superintendents explain what those are as they introduce themselves. It's divided up into two areas. One is student support, and one is student learning. And then with that in mind, we have Assistant Superintendent Voorhees. If you can introduce yourself and then your role and the areas that you supervise, and then we'll go with Assistant Superintendent Nelson.
Thank you. I'm Leah Voorhees, the Assistant Superintendent of Student Support. In that role, I serve as the State Director of Special Education. And we have a special education programs director under me, because special education is a huge section. And her name is Kim Fratto. Then we also have the director of the Center for Continuous School Improvement, Tracy Vandeventer, and she is responsible for the federal and state school improvement efforts that are required by our legislature, by your board rule, and by the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And then we also have child nutrition programs, which is led by Kathleen Britton, and she's the director of child nutrition programs. And then we have several teams that I also directly supervise that are led by coordinators. The Safe and Healthy Schools team, the adult education team, the youth and custody team, the fiscal and data team, and then also the federal programs and related state initiatives team. So I supervise each of those teams as well.
A big plate. So Assistant Superintendent Nielsen.
Yeah, good morning. It's my privilege to work at the State Board of Education as the Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning. And part of that, I'm privileged to work with Talia Longhurst, who's the Director of Career and Technical Education. And Jennifer Thronston, who's the Director of our Teaching Learning section. This committee that you're serving on, you'll get the opportunity to meet many of the staff members associated with both of those sections as you oversee or direct. This committee specifically directs a lot of the work that is done in that area. I also serve as the Director of Assessment and Accountability for the State Board. I've worked for the board for just over 5 years, received my formal education at Utah State University, where I, after graduating in the mid-90s, went to work at Teton High School in Driggs, Idaho, before coming back to Utah and working for Box Elder School District for just over 20 years.
Thank you, Darren. We also have our AAG, Brian Quisenberry, and we have the distinct honor of being able to have him as our legal counsel for this committee. So, Brian.
Oh, good morning, friends. Happy Friday morning. Just nice here to be with you and amongst you. I wonder if it's blasphemy to say that this is the best committee out of all of them. Some like me might hold that opinion, but maybe we don't share that with others in the office or other board members. But at any rate, just a wonderful group of people here to work with that really make the work enjoyable. I've come to know and appreciate the staff and superintendency members here for the almost 7 years that I've worked here. So at any rate, I'm an assistant attorney general, so I'm actually employed by the attorney general's office, but I am assigned to the state board, and so I spend full time with the board, and here to provide legal services, help with any kind of legal related or otherwise issues here. So thank you, Patty.
Thank you. And then we have the person who makes everything happen, the magic behind the scenes, Andrea Curtin.
Hi, I'm Andrea Curtin, and I support Patty Norman and Director of Strategic Initiatives, Todd Call. And previously to this position, I have served for 12 years in career and technical education at the state board, and started my education career as a kindergarten teacher, and then moved around the country and was involved in different aspects of education in several different states that we lived in while we moved around, and then back in Utah here. So I'm excited, and I agree with Brian that this is a great committee, and I'm happy to serve with you.
That's the leadership team that helps support the Standards and Assessment Committee. I'm turning it back over to you, Chair Booth.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Norman. We're so grateful for this excellent team, for their background, for their experience, for their many years of expertise that we're able to benefit from. And we look forward to our ongoing work together. Let's now introduce our board members who comprise this committee. I'll begin. I'm Randy Booth. This is my third year on the board. I've previously served in the Law and Licensing Committee, and I'm very excited to be a part of the Standards and Assessment Committee. My great love is education. I served as a professor at Brigham Young University for 43 years before retiring, and it's been my privilege to work with students all over the world, having lectured and taught in 43 different countries as I've traveled the world with BYU. I've been involved with public education and school boards for many years. It was my privilege to serve for 16 years on the NEBO School Board of Education, and also on the MTech Board of Directors. And so I have great interest in CTE and in every way that we can provide opportunities for our children and youth to prepare themselves for successful lives. My wife is a lifelong educator and served as a teacher and as a principal for 47 years before she retired this last year. We have 10 grandchildren, 3 children, and we're just excited to continue to work with all of you to ensure that their education is preparing them for a great life. Let's now introduce Natalie Klein. Member Klein, would you please give us a little background on you and your family?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Natalie Klein. I represent District 9. It's the South Jordan, Bluffdale, Harriman, Riverton area. And this is my first time on the Standards and Assessment Committee. It's a new assignment in my third year, beginning my third year here on the board. And I'm excited to be working on this committee. And I've got 4 children and almost 8 grandchildren, and have a deep love and concern for the children of our state. Want to make sure that they have the best educational experience possible.
Thank you very much. We will excuse our vice chair from the school board, Jenny Earl, who is away with family matters today. Let's now introduce Sarah Reel. Sarah, would you give us a little background on you and your family?
Hi, good morning. I am having technical issues, so I'm trying to play IT here and work through what's going on with my Zoom. So I apologize for being late, which leads me into what I do at Salt Lake Community College, which is that I'm the director of digital marketing. I've been at Salt Lake Community College for 13 years. I manage the institution's web team, video production, social media, email marketing, and anything digital that we are going to see come up, I'm sure, in the next day. I also teach at Salt Lake Community College. I teach political science. I got my master's degree in political science from Utah State University, where I worked before I started working at Salt Lake Community College. So I've been in higher ed for almost 20 years, teaching for 10 years. And I come from a family of educators. My mom's a teacher in Granite School District. My sister's a teacher in Cache County. And I represent District 5, which is a newly drawn district. It includes Salt Lake City west of 7th East. So downtown, Fair Park, Glendale, Ballpark. I have South Salt Lake, Murray, most of Murray, and a huge chunk of West Valley. So that's my district. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We might also mention that Sarah's got 2 beautiful dogs that you may have seen pictures of as she was campaigning for this office. And I'm sure that they are a very important part of your life.
Yes. When I'm not, I have 2 passions. One is education and the other is public lands. And I'm a huge outdoor enthusiast. I'm sure I will show up to a board meeting at some point after wrecking on my mountain bike, and I'll have scrapes all the way down my arm. I love mountain biking, road biking, and just being in the mountains as much as possible. I love the open space that we have here in Utah. I'm super grateful for it.
Well, welcome, Sarah. We're happy to look forward to our association together. As vice chair for this committee, I'm happy to introduce Emily Green from Cedar City. Emily, would you give us a little bit of background on you and your passion for education and your family?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm extremely happy to be here. I'm Emily Green. I represent District 14. It's the middle section of Utah. So we've got a lot of different counties that we cover, from Carbon all the way over to Millard, down to Iron, up to Juab. So we're just that whole midsection. I graduated from SUU with Family and Consumer Science. My minor was Early Childhood Development, and I have I'm currently serving on the board at IHC for 3 years. We're small business owners of over 30 years, but for us, it's been about 20. I have 5 children that keep me super busy, and with that, it led me into the world of education, and my passion definitely came from starting to be involved with them in their schooling experience, and just seeing all of the work that teachers do and everything on all the different levels that go into making a wonderful school environment. And so I served on the PTA, PTA president, and I've been involved for, my oldest is 17. So we're well over a decade of being in the school and that being our forefront and our main interests. So again, I thank you for being here.
Thank you, Vice Chair Green. As you can see, this is a rich group of people with wonderful experience. And if we focus all of that experience and that passion on the children of our state, on the standards and assessment of the various content areas that we will be supervising and creating and developing, we're sure to come up with the very best solutions. I also wanted to just give a shout out to those of you who are frequently here, even when you're sick, when you're overly extended in your personal lives. I'm so happy that this is such a priority, that we're here together and that we're using this time effectively to bless the lives of children. I would like to now take just a moment. I believe the first item on the agenda is public comment. Is that correct, Andrea?
We actually have had a tradition in standards and assessment to start with some recognition or some kind of applause for a program or individual that's done great work at our office. So that's usually our first item. And then we do have one piece of public comment today, and she is here. So we'll do that right after our first agenda item.
Great. I appreciate your understanding. I did get Zoom working on my computer, so we're up and at 'em, but I've now got to find the agenda, which I had before I had to turn off the computer and turn it back on. So if we could proceed with our celebration, who's going to be doing that today?
I'll be leading that in this morning. The celebration this morning, the recognition, and I'm going to have Michael Hakkarainen, if you'll turn your camera on this morning. And I want you to know that right now, as we speak, he's going to get lower and lower in his seat, because this is a work of so many people, and it's a lot on his shoulders that is leading and guiding this work. And as I'm reading this through, if we were to actually say how many people were involved in all of this work, I think we would break Zoom's confines of who could all be on here. But some of the key staff that have been involved in these efforts are also Katie Hill, if you want to turn your camera on, if you're here, Cami Dupree, Nathan Ock, Jennifer Thronson, Val Murdoch, Clarissa Stebbing, Tanya Alvarnoz, Emily Berry, Kim Fratto, Sid Seeger, Leah Voorhees, and Todd Call. And that's just a few that have led out in these efforts, because the efforts have been statewide. It's been ongoing for quite some time. And again, if we can have those staff members raise their hand and be recognized for this work that is really foundational and a framework that supports our strategic plan. So we always like to start the recognitions with the focus. And the focus is that the Utah State Board of Education is committed to the vision of, upon completion, all Utah students are prepared to succeed and lead by having the knowledge and skills to learn, engage civically, and lead meaningful lives. In order to accomplish these goals of the board, staff are engaged in supporting the everyday work to achieve this goal and assisting the board to create equitable conditions for student success, advocating for necessary resources, developing policy, and providing effective oversight and support. Those quotes that I read to you are directly from the mission and vision of the Utah State Board of Education as we move this work forward. So this month, we're highlighting the work of PCBL. PCBL stands for Personalized Competency-Based Learning, and the Utah State Board of Education has committed to support the growth of each student to ultimately gain the qualities that are outlined in both the Utah's Portrait of a Graduate, and we refer to that as POG, and Personalized Competency-Based Learning, referred to as PCBL. So this is the bridge by which we are building the capacity of our educators and students to achieve. And specialists have compiled the guidance for this work into the PCBL framework, which outlines the 5 components that encompass this bridge. And the 5 components are the culture of learning, learner agency, demonstrated competency and assessment, customized supports, and social emotional learning. This framework was one of the documents that the new Utah Effective Teaching Standards that you'll hear referred to as UETs. There's lots of acronyms, and just so all of you new board members know, we do have an acronyms document. It's a decoder, the decoder ring from the cereal box. And so this design team used to create conditions for more personalized learning opportunities for students and guidance for educators to facilitate the conditions where this can happen. The effort provides cohesion in the expectations we have for our educators, and the critical work cited in the strategic plan is helping the field to see how effective instruction is the path by which the classroom environment promotes the development of students who engage in their learning and their own progress and own their progress. The connection between what educators have been doing effectively in practice and the overall vision for developing student capacity and self-direction is how these updated effective teaching standards can help to drive this critical work. Through collaborating with partners in higher education and K-12, we have also outlined specific competencies for educators to develop that recognize increased capacity to create classroom environments that are conducive to developing students towards the portrait of a graduate through personalized competency-based learning. These include evidence-based instructional strategies that support effective practice and give students the tools and skills they need, not only in the future to be successful, but immediately in their current academic goals. We are currently designing professional learning in the form of coursework that would lead to a PCBL endorsement for educators who choose to engage in building and applying understanding of PCBL. We know that if we are to expect our educators to build the capacity of our students to achieve the portrait of a graduate, they must have the opportunities to build their own professional capacity. USBE is committed to designing these opportunities and supporting our LEAs and what they need to build all parts of their systems to facilitate this. The strategic plan includes the aim. Upon completion, all Utah students are prepared to succeed and lead by having the knowledge and skills to learn, engage civically, and lead meaningful lives, as stated before. Through this work, we are building structures, professional skills, and students who can ultimately leave our K-12 system with the competencies they'll need to achieve this vision. All of this is supporting the work of the board and our goals and mission throughout the educational system. Thank you. And again, if we can have all of those on, wave and show a support and appreciation for the work that they have done.
Thank you very much. It is an important work, and we recognize the many hours and the sleepless nights and the deadlines and the craziness of trying to pull something this complex off. But it's worth it. It's for our children. And so grateful for your dedication. Thank you. And what a great celebration. Appreciate that, Deputy Superintendent Norman. We'll now proceed to item 1.2, which is public comment. And Andrea, would you like to just remind our visitor today what the parameters are for their comments and the time schedule?
Sure. We'd like to welcome Monica Wilbur to our committee. She would like to make public comment, and I have a timer here for 2 minutes. You'll be limited to that. If you have further comment that you'd like to make, we will accept written comment, and we can put that also in the minutes and provide it to all the board members. So if she is available, if she can unmute.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Monica, would you please go ahead?
Thank you, Chair Booth. I think if people understood PCBL for what it actually is, and not just what they're told it is by its purveyors, that they'd be deeply concerned that it's being used in our schools and on our kids. A quick history: PCBL evolved from outcomes-based education and competency-based education. Outcomes-based education is a learning philosophy based on controlling student achievement by standardizing expectations. Outcomes-based education, or OBE, means that all kids, regardless of their unique differences or varying backgrounds, are expected to achieve the same learning outcomes at the same age, at the same pace, and at the same time. OBE developed into competency-based education, or CBE, which expands the measured outcomes beyond academic and physical skills to include soft social skills, or competencies. Competencies means social and emotional attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs. They aren't objectively academic in nature at all. They're just not. Competency-based education is achieved by incorporating social emotional learning, or SEL, into instruction, curriculum, and assessments to steer a child toward whatever values and mindsets that align with the state's pedagogical priorities. These priorities consistently align with diversity, equity, and inclusion agendas, in which diversity enforces thought conformity, equity justifies equal outcomes and not equal opportunities, and inclusivity excludes those who aren't diverse in the right way. So competency-based education is bad, but it's nothing compared to personalized competency-based learning, which takes CBE one giant leap forward by using technology to inform, track, evaluate, measure, and shape competencies relentlessly. My local elementary school right now is assigning actual scores to children based on how much enthusiasm they show for learning, or how much they understand their actions impact others, and how much sensitivity and understanding they show for others. Frankly, this blows my mind that schools have the temerity to think they should be in the business of grading children's attitudes when it should be clear it's none of their business. I'd just like to say that if you're a self-respecting adult, you would never in a million years knowingly consent to your own actions being tracked like this, let alone measured. I'd like to ask this committee to research the literature on PCBL and seriously and explicitly reject policies and programs that continue to support or elevate PCBL's role in the board's strategic plan. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Monica. We appreciate your perspective, and we will look forward to continuing discussions on this matter. We'll now, in preparation for our move to 1.3, we will have just a little review, particularly for those of us who are new and those who may be listening in, as to what the procedure is, what the basic review procedure is for these unique standards revision projects that are ongoing. For example, with financial literacy, where this is a course rather than a full standards evaluation for literacy or numeracy for social studies. And I'd like just a quick Reader's Digest in a nutshell review of what the review process is comprised of, and the differences between the major reviews for major content areas and then those that are course reviews. And then in preparation for our discussion this morning and our action in regards to financial literacy, where we are in that process, what step we're on, and what's next, as we then will spend some time considering together this particular item. Dr. Norman, would you be able to invite someone to give us that quick in a nutshell?
Yes, and as we begin that, I'm going to orient you just for all of you that are new to this committee, what you're going to be seeing. So as we're navigating through, you'll see some things popping up on the screen. And one of the things that I want, because we've had questions about it, to show you as we're going through this. So the first step, I will answer that question. The first step is you'll see a document called motions on here. This is something that is not behind the scenes. It is something that the public could see because it's in board backups. And when you see this right here, it says these are the recommended actions. So the recommended actions on that document document are actually those that are already included with the board item. And at the bottom of those, it'll be a recommended action. That doesn't mean it's the action that this committee has to take. It's just something that's a starting point for the committee to begin a discussion, and any other action can come forward from the committee. It's just a starting point if a committee member wanted to bring that forward. So you'll be seeing some of the things, and then sometimes we have our board members send in some motions prior to the meeting that they'd like to have for consideration. And so those are added to the document for discussion. The reason why we have them added to the document is in real time. Sometimes it's difficult to start typing the motions out and getting them correct and making sure that everyone has those as a common understanding. So as you're going to be seeing the agenda pop up, you'll also be seeing the backups pop up that are already populated in Civic Clerk, that is for public review and access as well. And then each of the areas that are going to come through, then we're going to have those documents that we can talk through. We have different processes for standards. And the first one that you're going to see is going to be going through CTE. It's the financial literacy standards. And maybe what we can do, Chair Booth, is as we go through that area, we'll describe the process for that area. Director Longhurst is going to be telling you that there's going to be a possible month in November where you're going to want to block off a large chunk of time because there's a lot of CTE standards that come through at that time. I think about 80. She can talk to you about what that process is. And then our core subject areas, that's a much longer process that's specified. And as a board, you can make changes to that process. The one thing that the board has agreed upon is that once a process begins for the core standards or any of the standards that are under revision, is that process is complete before a standards revision process is amended. And so that's one thing that the board has agreed upon in the past. So as we go through, if Talia, if you want to start with, and I'll share the document of what the process is for financial literacy. And then as each person comes through, because you're going to be hearing financial literacy, you're going to be hearing college and career awareness. You're also going to be seeing digital literacy standards, and then a larger one, which is the English language arts standards. It's a lot of standards for one day. We have asked for additional time, which is why we started at 8 a.m. this morning. Standards does typically take a little bit longer than some of the committees, just because there is a lot of line by line review when it comes to the standards, just to make sure the board is able to do their very best work, and the committee, it is a very good working group to make some of those changes that come through. Direct, is that a good beginning, Chair Booth?
Thank you. Yes, please
Okay.
proceed.
Okay, Director Longhurst, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good morning. My name is Talia Longhurst. I'm the Director of Career and Technical Education at USBE. I'm happy to be with you this morning. I have two staff members with me today, and you'll be hearing from them as we move through our 3 agenda items today. Per Chair Booth's request, let me just review the process that you're going to be going through today with our 3 courses. And interestingly enough, these are the only courses under the purview of CTE that follow this process. We have another process that you'll see in the November, December timeframe each year that's for our CTE courses. So the process that we're going to follow today is for non-core courses that fall under CTE. And there are 3 of them: general financial literacy, which we'll talk about first, college and career awareness, and digital literacy. And they all follow this process. It's kind of a mid-level process, if I could say it that way, that the board has approved, because they're each just a single course that are required. General financial literacy, for example, is required in state statute, but all 3 are also included in board rule as either a high school requirement or a middle school requirement. And so you can see the process outlined there. The thing that's different, well, there's a lot of things that are different, but some of the bigger points that I think it's important for you to understand about these 3 courses is that the committee, the first step that we take on is to solicit feedback from teachers, from industry professionals, from people who are out there doing the work of these that are covered under these courses every day. We start with them when a revision cycle starts to really find out what's been working, what they'd like to see change, what updates in industry are happening that we need to connect with. And then we convene a committee of subject matter experts, and we start revising the course. We come to you today for for college and career awareness and digital literacy to the committee to request 30-day approval for public comment. For financial literacy, that step happened in what month is this? In December. Once those go out for 30-day public comment, our writing committee gets back together, reviews public comment, makes any changes that they feel might be necessary based on public comment. And then we come back to Standards and Assessment Committee and talk about where we are with the current draft of standards. And we ask for your approval to move that forward then to full board for final approval of the standards. So today we're going to be in that step number 4 with all of you in committee for financial literacy. And we're only in step number 2 for college and career awareness and digital literacy. So since it's all the same process, I just wanted to cover all of that at the same time. Are there any questions about that?
So our first item is going to be focused on step number 4, the revisions based on public input. And that took place, you said, in December?
Yes.
All right.
Because you are a week later than usual for board meeting in the month of January, that actually gave us time to get our 30 days in, meet, revise based on public comment, and come right back to committee the very next month. For the other 2 courses, our 30 days will come up after the February board meeting, so you won't see us back on those 2 courses until the earliest March.
Thank
Leah,
you.
can you also mention where the board is at, where they're providing their comments or their input is during in this process?
Generally, what we've always done is that's included during the public comment phase. So we received some comments from a board member about general financial literacy that came in during the public comment phase. The writing committee is able to take those comments along with all other public comments and consider those in any revisions.
Okay.
Oh, how does that work for those of us that were not on the board? Were we still able to give during that 30-day comment, or just those that were part of the committee prior to the beginning of this year?
The public comment was noticed out to public, out via email to USBE. So that is how I receive public comment from a board member for financial literacy.
Part of that is they come to the standards and ask for it to be released, and then it's talked about in the full board meeting. So it has that 2-step process of going to the committee, and then the full board agrees for it to go out. And so that would be the time where the full board would have been given notice that it was going out to comment. That doesn't mean that we can't talk about some of the public comment today, though. So that's part of this committee's work.
So normally, as board members, whether we're on this committee or on any other committee in the whole board, we would have already given our comments for financial literacy strands and standards as part of the public comment that took place in the month of December. And so we would now be looking today at those recommended changes from the writing committee based on that input from both board and general public, which you're going to present, I'm assuming, in just a moment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, any questions from our board members?
Yes, I do.
Member Klein.
Yes, so the chart that we've got up here with the proposed changes, the second draft changes, are those already incorporated into the draft that's in our board backup? Or are those what we're talking about, how to incorporate today?
Chair, if I may.
Please.
So draft 2 of the standards that you have in board backup incorporates the changes that are on that chart.
Any further questions, Member Klein?
No.
Were there other questions from the board?
Yes, I did have a question.
Vice Chair Green.
Yes, so I was wanting to actually add something onto Strand 1's standard one. So I didn't know exactly when I should present that, other than maybe it should have been done before. So tell me how we proceed here.
What would be the process?
So what,
First?
yeah, so what the process is, and what is most helpful for staff, is if motions can be sent in beforehand. And but that's we're all learning. So today's our learning day. It's our first day of school in this committee. So we're going to give each other grace and learn and grow together. So what would usually happen is a board member would send in their comments prior, and then for public comment. But then they could also send in comments at this time and say, can we have this for consideration? Then what would happen if you wanted to make changes at this time, even according to what you see coming from the public comment? If it's a really substantive change, it might have to go back to the writing committee and have them review it. If it's a small technical change that isn't something that is, a big, huge shift, it's something that could perhaps be made on the fly right here and have it just kind of go through this committee and moving it forward. So depending on the depth of the change is what the next step would be on this. So then as you're seeing this, I'm going to kind of put my cursor. I'm not sure if you can see it or not. I'll highlight something so you can see where I'm at. What we would do is we would recognize what it is that you have or your amendment that you'd like made. And then on this motion page right here, which we do have, for example, board member Earl submitted prior to a motion that she would like to have recognized. And so she's usually on this committee, and we miss her today, but someone would if an outside committee member that's not on standards and assessment would like a change, they can submit it, but it still requires a committee member to bring it forward. That's something that I think some board members don't recognize. They'll submit something and we put it on here for discussion, but then if a committee member doesn't bring it forward, it's not discussed. And so that's one of the things that happens. So then we'll have it populated. We have here, as you can see, we have one that was submitted prior to, which is right here. And then we have the motion for the board, which is the recommended motion that came prior to any discussion today. And so what would happen is we would have for example, it could state the recommended motion here, and then we would add to it and amend Strand 1 and have that if that was approved in this committee. And then we would have a final motion to the board, which is, approve these as amended. And then that would go to the board for their final approval.
All right, that sounds good. And actually, what is there is what I was bringing forward. So
perfect.
The process just sunk in. So we're good.
Okay. Yes,
thank you so much.
Are there any other questions from board members? Member Klein. You are.
Yes. Okay, so that's an amendment now out that's on there.
It's not yet an amendment. So it has to be brought
a motion
in the form of a motion. Yes.
So I think Emily just did that, right? That was your intent, Emily, to bring that forward as a motion.
That's correct. So I might have jumped the gun. I was just clarifying when we should do that.
Member Klein, do you have a follow-up?
I just wanted to amend the motion.
So do we need the motion first before we actually amend, get into the amendments?
Does Emily just need to say the motion?
Yes, as part of the transcript, we would need to have Vice Chair Green read the motion, as her motion. And as you can see on here, we track who says the motion and then whether it passes or not. You'll see that we'll say whether it passes for or against, and then it will be 4-1, 3-2, whatever, 1-4, and then whatever. Then we'll say passes unanimously, and then we'll also list if it doesn't, which board members were for or against it.
Okay,
so we need, first of all, the original motion, so then we can proceed with possibility of some amendments from board members that might be coming in.
Yes, and the original motion would be about it would include this, that the committee recommends, the board approves, and then including an amendment to Strand 1, Standard 1, and then speaking to that motion why you would want it. So that would be the full motion. Does that make sense?
Great.
So, yeah, if that's what you wanted to. So if I move this here, and I'm going to move this here. And then right now we're talking, so this motion here, the general motion hasn't been stated, but right now we're just talking about as with the amendments. Does that make sense?
Right. But should we go back now and state that original motion before we begin talking about amendments?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I would entertain a motion, Vice Chair Green, if you wanted to make that motion.
If we have more amendments, is that going to kill that opportunity to make additional amendments?
No.
By adding
committee,
that original motion to it?
In committee, it's not as formal as in full board meeting. We also don't need to have a second in committee. And so you would make a motion, and then what we do is we have the original, to approve, but then we would have this first motion, and we usually in committee, and you guys can decide how you'd like to do it, especially because there's so much in standards. We usually go motion by motion and approve it. If there's several motions, like, in social studies, there was probably hundreds of motions, and then we just go motion by motion, and then in the end we would state this primary motion again and say as amended.
Okay, so Board Member Green, would you please make a motion that includes that primary motion, and then you can go ahead and add the amendment that you are making to that primary motion.
Yes. All right, making sure my volume's on there. So I read the motion, right? The committee recommends that the board approves the general financial literacy standards, including any conforming technical changes needed for all standards. And I make a motion to include, to explain, and also explain the structure and role of the Federal Reserve. And we can work on those connector words as well.
Okay, we have a motion that the committee recommends that the board approves the general financial literacy standards, including any conforming technical changes needed for all standards, and amend Strand 1, Standard 1 to read, explain the structure and role of the Federal Reserve. Would you like to speak to the motion?
I think that this is just one area of financial literacy that would add depth and understanding to the structure of how some other areas of financial literacy works. And I find it relevant that students, specifically in the 11th and 12th grade, would understand those.
Thank you, Vice Chair Green. Are there other comments or questions regarding her motion and amendment?
So,
Member Klein.
yes, I would like to amend the motion
Go ahead.
to add in addition to structure and role, I would add history, the history, structure, and role of the Federal Reserve. And let's see, and then how its monetary and fiscal policies affect the swings, affect swings in the market.
I'm going to navigate back and forth between the motion screen that, and if you could repeat that one more time, Board Member Klein, so we can get it stated directly.
Sure. So it would say Strand 1, Standard 1 would say, explain the history, role, and structure, or however she's got it in there, just adding history of the Federal Reserve, comma, how its monetary and fiscal policies affect the swings in the market. She would probably, yeah. structure in the federal, let's see. So explain the history, role, and structure of the Federal Reserve and how its monetary and fiscal policies affect swings in the market.
Okay, point of clarification, Dr. Norman or Director Longhurst. So with these sorts of amendments, with the process, as you've explained it, would this be considered an end run because we're bypassing the writing committee and going directly to this committee and saying, this is what we're going to send on to the board, never having given an opportunity to the writing committee to consider these new ideas that are being presented today?
I'm going to turn that over to Director Longhurst. We have Brecken on here that is in this area. Would that be a substantive change? Would the writing committee then need to add more to the standards in order to have that a part of the area in order to facilitate the request of adding the additional words in there?
Yes, and I'll tag Brecken in just a second. Brecken Haywood is our specialist who oversees the financial literacy course. Let me just say one thing to remember, and whatever the board decides is what we will implement. But this is a one semester general financial literacy course. It's not intended to be a deep dive into economics. It is intended, and we do have some statutorily required concepts to be covered. This particular depth that you're requesting to go into may be a little deep for most students. This would be covered, these kinds of concepts would typically be covered in economics courses that we have, but I'll let Brecken speak more. She's been working with the writing committee and the industry professionals and the legislators, and she might have some additional comments. Brecken.
Thank you, Talia. Yes, that's about the same. I'm same lines as Talia has been talking about. We work really hard in this course. We do only have a semester to cover all of the important terms and concepts of financial literacy, personal financial literacy. And so this course is already quite full, and part of public comment and some of the comments we received even prior to us revising this course was that it is packed full, and teachers have to really work hard and be structured to get through this class with the type of content that's in there now. And so we do have to just be aware of that and take into consideration when we start explaining, going deeper into concepts, that there's a lot of background knowledge that has to be added in order to get to those concepts. And so what might look maybe or seem like something small could be quite a bit bigger or take quite a bit more time in the course. And yes, though we know economics is an important piece to understanding a person's financial role personally, but also kind of how they fit into our economic system, it is not necessarily the main focus of the course. But we could take it back to the writing committee and have them weigh in a little bit more, or I don't think necessarily, if the board feels like this really is an important piece to add, that we could probably move forward. And if the board chooses to approve this.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
So when I was adding this in, I was not thinking about it going deep into it, just merely the mention and how markets can be manipulated or inadvertently affected by certain policies or the manipulating of the interest rates and things like that, just on a very surface level. It doesn't have to go deep.
I appreciate this being one of our first, and Chair, may I? Sorry.
Please. Go right
Yes,
ahead.
I always forget the formality and you know, so we will recognize all of us as staff, making sure that we're able to speak. I, in doing this, can't raise my hand. And so that's why sometimes I butt in, just for all of your awareness. I'm not able as how it works, and neither is Brian. He's not able to as well raise his hand. So one of the things, and this is the perfect example that this committee is going to have the longest conversations on, and this is the perfect example, is what should be the standards themselves. When we talk about the amount of time, if we look at the standards as the focus, the priority, the most important things for students to know and be able to do, that if we didn't have a lot of time and that this was the most important thing. And so as Board Member Klein's talking about it, it's a brief overview. It's not with depth and complexity of doing those things. And if the teacher did or did not have time, so if they were running out of time in the day, would this be something that make sure we have to have on there or not? And as you're going through it, one of the things we've heard with feedback is if there's too much on there, then the teachers select. And so it's no longer really under the purview of the board because of the amount of time that's in a classroom. So if we get too many standards, then it becomes the thing about time, and then the teacher or the LEA is actually selecting the priorities instead of the priorities of the board. And so as you're going through all of these, think to yourself, is this the one of the most important things if we had not a lot of time, or if time was a factor for students to know and be able to do? And then as a board, as a committee, you get to make those decisions. And so staff wouldn't be the ones to say yes or no on that. It would be up to all of you on this committee to say, yes, this is one of the most important things for students to know and be able to do. And I would hate for any teacher to take it off of their list because they didn't have enough time.
Good. So this is helpful. Member Klein, do you have a follow-up?
I guess I don't see it as being a substantive change. It just added a couple words, and in what it's already asking, it already talks about the Federal Reserve's monetary and fiscal policies. It's just adding how that can affect the markets.
All right. Is there further? Yes.
So
no.
I have other things that we can do, or do we want to vote on this one individually and then go to the other amendments?
I'm at a loss to really know how to do it, because if we do it just one by one, as Deputy Superintendent Norman mentioned, we usually do one by one, then that tends to not allow us to keep the big view in mind, because, okay, this is important. And then somebody else says, well, this is important and this is important. And we just kind of come up with a laundry list rather than being able to look at the scope and sequence and the entirety of what we're asking. And if we're trying to see if this is really our priority, we don't know until we've heard what else you feel is critical and important. And we're very interested in what each of you is bringing forward, but I don't want to just do a laundry list that gets longer and longer and longer, and then we say, yes, we're voting, and we are going to accept this, we're going to accept that, and then by the time we're finished, we go, wow, we accepted a lot, didn't we? Maybe we ought to go back now and figure out what we really need to do, because that's too much. Even though it's all good, there's just not time in the day. So I'm not sure I would be very grateful for some direction on how to proceed more efficiently.
Chair Booth, another way that we have done it in standards is we bring all of the motions forward for the one standard, and then they're all on here for consideration, and then we go back and then we put each one to a vote, and then you've seen the overall. Depending on the number of motions, that's really easy to do. When there is a few motions, less than 10, when it gets more than 10, then it gets very cumbersome of direction of where we're going.
Good. Well, I like that. I like the complete view idea, so we could continue adding motions to this particular strand or this particular standard until we have all the ones that want to be considered, and then make a decision that feels smarter and a better use of our time. Let me ask for Member Real's comment or question.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I wanted to say, Dr. Norman, I really appreciate your comments about adding the complexities to the standards. Feedback I've gotten from educators in my district is that oftentimes the standards are so complex that they just end up skipping pieces of them. And so I really appreciate your comments of looking for the most important, most necessary, because as we know, educators, some days there'll be a snow day or there'll be an assembly that's added, and it really shortens that time within the class period. My other comment, Dr. Norman, is do you mind zooming in on this motion page so that everyone doesn't have to see how badly my forehead is wrinkled when I'm staring at the screen? I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So are there other amendments to this particular strand or standard that we want to add? Member Klein.
I do. So on the first, so I guess it's the second line where it says compare and contrast expansion, recession, and depression. I would just add to that line, and how governments manipulating the markets can inadvertently or intentionally cause these swings, which is, again, it kind of leads into the next one that we already did. So it's just kind of the same idea, just kind of layering that idea.
Repeat that.
Sure. So adding to the end of that, and how governments manipulating the markets can inadvertently or intentionally cause these swings. That's all. And that would lead right into the first one that we did. And then the one that follows that, it's not an amendment, but it just says explain the law of supply and demand. So those lead right into that, which is the true principle, right? How the market fixes itself. And then right after that is the paragraph that starts with analyze, right? So if you want to take that, and then I'll amend that. So, and I did send these to you to try and make it easier so you don't have to type it all. But if you just want, I can tell you what to type so you don't have to go back and find it. All right, so it would, we would strike analyze and type in learn in place of analyze. And then after how, you'd strike out the larger economy.
I am going to bring up your motions page.
Okay.
Hold on.
Yeah, that's fine. It'd be easier.
Chair Booth, do you mind if while she's pulling that up, I have a question for Brecken. Brecken, I'm unaware of the high school level economics courses that are offered and what is offered. Can you give me a rundown of the opportunities students have in this grade level or even in high school to take any, macro or micro economics courses?
Sure, I can give you what I know. It's actually another career and technical education course. It falls under the business, finance, and marketing cluster of courses. And it does dive into macro and micro economics. And the strands and standards can be found on our website, but it goes pretty in depth, and there's quite a bit of concepts covered in that economics course at a deeper, kind of at a deeper knowledge there.
Thank you.
Were you able to find that, Patty?
While we were talking, I sent a reply this morning that there wasn't an attachment for that one. So there was an attachment for the digital literacy, but not the one for financial literacy as we're going through that. And then while you're doing that, I'm just wondering from the content experts on here, and I do not have a financial literacy background. So this is really a comment from someone that's not expert in this area. Is swings the correct term that you would use on that? And then, or is there another term that is the industry standard term?
I'm guessing that I should be answering that. I think swings would be an okay term. I think if I brought it back to our committee, we may be able to come up with some other terms as well. But I don't think necessarily swings would be inappropriate.
Thank you.
Okay, I just sent that. Let me know if you got it. I apologize about that. I probably sent the general, the digital literacy twice.
It's not here yet, but we'll pull it over when we get there. So are there any others that you want us to pull over at this time?
Sure, you can do the sentence. It says, explain how scarcity of financial resources affects rational economic choices. Okay, you got that? Is that this? Okay, and then just add to the end of that, and how to prepare financially for times of scarcity.
Would you say that one more time?
Yep, explain how scarcity of financial resources affects rational economic choices. That's the part that was already part of the standards. And how to prepare financially for times of scarcity. That's it.
And maybe Brecca, I'm not sure if you can or not, if you can put in the chat the link to the economics courses and see where that overlap is, so that we can see what the difference is between something that is personal finance, this financial literacy that is in statute and the required elements that are in statute, and then what would be an economics course, and that might help the committee see what those differences are. And that might be helpful as well, that this is focused on that
individual
financial literacy.
Okay.
Board member, there it
came. Want me to just read to you what I have for that previous one?
I just
you find it.
I just got it now.
Okay, great.
I'm going to pull over all 5 motions, and I'm putting it right here that you have. I'm going to color code those so that we know that those are what was just pulled over, just so that we see that in bringing those up, that we can review those.
Okay.
Just we have those on there. And again, this is a little bit different. Usually, and I'll put those maybe in a blue color. What happens is this would have been sent out via public comment. And so at this point in time, there usually isn't this amount of changes that would occur. And so just letting the committee know that. And so I'm thinking, and I'm not sure, this may need to go back to the writing committee with these. So let's go to where we were at. So we had general financial literacy. You didn't bring forward these changes, correct?
Right. That's just the description of the course, and it's just slightly reworked.
Okay. So Chair Booth, these are all of them, and if we can have maybe board member Klein just speak to each of these sets, and then we can pull them forward for consideration. And that might be the easiest way to do it instead of doing motion to amend. So if we just go through and so she just spoke to the one right here. And we already had this one, right? You already spoke to this one, is that correct? And
I don't think I have that. I don't think we got the first one right there. Define inflation and explain, instead of why it's important, what causes it.
Okay, and then.
Okay, and then the
Chair
second one we
Chair Booth, is
did.
that okay if we go this way? Chair Booth, is that okay if we follow
That's
that?
fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Would it help for me to read each one?
Yes.
Okay. Compare and contrast expansion, recession, and depression, and how governments manipulating the markets can inadvertently or intentionally cause them. I don't know if them is the right terminology right there. There's a better word for that, but explain the history, role. We can leave role in there, that's fine. History, role, and structure is what we added before of the Federal Reserve, and the and should be there, and how its monetary and fiscal policies affect the swings in the market. And then explain the law of supply and demand, that's already in it. Learn, this is the one we were starting to type up. Learn how the larger, healthy free market economy is able to develop naturally when the natural ups and downs of the market are left to correct themselves by allowing the natural law of supply and demand to play out. A healthy economy has also benefited from individual participants' rational economic choices. And then that last one that we just did, explain how scarcity of financial resources affects rational economic choices and how to prepare financially for times of scarcity. So that's all for Strand 1 standard 1.
Chair Booth, if we would like to vote on those at this time, if that would be appropriate. So we could go each one. We could start with the beginning and just go through that strand for Strand 1, starting with this piece right here as an amendment. And then we can go to the next, and the next, and then take a vote if that's appropriate.
That's fine.
Chair Booth.
That's fine. Do you want me to read this one?
Yes, and then.
Okay. So this is for the general
just let me express a concern. So we're learning, we're figuring out how we should be doing this. As I look at the amount of feedback or the number of suggested changes, I feel very uncomfortable approving or disapproving or moving something forward when it's this substantive, without having passed any of what we're suggesting through the writing committee of experts who spend their life doing this, who are teaching the courses, who have already considered all of the public comment. So in the case of today and what we're learning is that isn't there a way that we can route this through the writing committee now before we make a recommendation to send it onto the board? I think they're all valuable ideas. I just don't want to do an end run around the writing committee and send things to the board that have not gone through the process.
They're pretty simple.
Well, I agree, but simple or not, the process our process is not designed for the board to write these things. It's the writing committee. And the board certainly can give all the input that it desires to give, but I don't want to jump over the writing committee after they're already doing what they're supposed to be and just add a number of things that they're not able to add to or consider, or we start getting a less cohesive standard for our children.
Wow.
Can I ask a question?
Kind of assuming that we're the final editors. We're not the final editors. We can add things so that the final editors are the people that have been paid to do this.
I would disagree. That's why we are here. That's why we are the board.
You are here to be the final editor?
I think
Yeah.
what we're here to be a final approval. So I think that what's in front of us, there is a lot. I would agree with that. And that might just be working out how the process goes, coming from here or moving forward, I would say. I think the one thing that I'm most hesitant if I were to cast a vote of approval is probably the course description at this point.
And that's
I
fine.
do think I think that one's
We
pretty
can-
heavy.
We can leave that out. I don't know if you've had a chance to read through it to see. I mean, it looks messy right there, but when you read it, it's not really, it's actually kind of simplified. Do you want me to read it?
Well, on that one, I
I'm
think
not
that's the only one
questioning-
that I would say, like, we probably need some time on that. However, I do feel that some of these other little words and the things that have been added are actually more clarifying and make them more relevant as standards and what teachers would be teaching to personal finance literacy. So
And I'm certainly not questioning what Member Klein is presenting in terms of whether, I'm not saying is that this is not better than what is currently there. I'm just saying that I don't feel it is our place as a board member at this point to just say, this is what it's going to be without going through the process and adding these great suggestions to the process that's in place.
So let me just clarify so I can keep understanding this process as well. So if these were, say, if I were to have come with amendments personally, which I have not done this meeting, I would have given that before this meeting. And who reviews that from there? Andrea, or Patty, is that something that you can help us understand?
Yeah, for this process, if we go back to this process right here, which is different than the core process, this goes out for the 30-day review, and the board is a part of that public review. And so then all of those are made, and then it comes back to this committee, and then this document is created. And we didn't go over this document. So then this document is created. You'll see something similar to any standards revision. It will talk about the current standard or this current strand, and then it will talk about what the first draft changes were. So the first draft changes, there were some overarching things that happened. For example, they split one of the strands into 2 different strands. So there were some overarching things that those that were on the original committee, statutorily, they said this needs to happen in order to be current. So then as it's sent out, they said, well, here's some differences that, from public comment, and they do trends. They look at what all of the comment says, and then they send it to the writing committee to be able to say, let's change some of these things. So then that is the draft 2. So draft 1 went out, public comment, including board member comment, was gathered. Then all of that was reviewed by the committee. And then we have here the second draft. And the second draft is what came after the public comment for your review. And so one of the things in considering any of these things is what is the priority standards? What are those things that students should know and be able to do just in that precise way? So then if there's substantive changes, if there's lots of changes, that would need to go back to the writing committee in order for them to be able to do that articulation throughout. So for example, and this was one that I was trying to allude to in the very beginning, if on our very first motion, so I'll go back to our very first motion right here, where it was explain the structure, and we added structure and role, and then we added the history, and then the how its monetary and fiscal policies affect swings in the market. So each one of those isn't just a sentence. Then that becomes the foundation for the lessons and the curriculum that's developed for that. And so unless someone was hearing our conversation right now, they wouldn't know if this piece right here that's added is less important than this piece right here. So as a standard, written as a standard, all of the things on this line would have equal importance because a teacher would be responsible for teaching those things. There's not a priority on here. It doesn't state on here, explain the history and in priority, manner, if there's time, the following things. And so that's kind of the thing as committee members you need to navigate is when it's being read, a teacher, an administrator, the parents are thinking all of these have equal priority. And so in writing these things, that's one thing to keep in mind again.
Thank you. Member Reel.
Thank you. Chair Booth, you have far more experience than I do in this process, but from my understanding, a lot of our role as the Board of Education is to advise and guide, right? But not necessarily, create ourselves some of these different pieces. And when it goes through the process, as Dr. Norman was talking through, that it's already gone through the process with the experts. How do we, what is the suggestion to this committee moving forward as we try to not manipulate or change that process or lessen the importance of that process when we get to this point? Because from my understanding, a lot of this is just advising and guiding, but not necessarily deconstructing and reconstructing at this point of the process.
Would someone like to speak to that?
If I go back to the process right here and where we're at, which is revised based on public input, that's what draft 2 was. And then they're submitted for approval. If there was a step added that is then revised based on, so again, this would not necessarily be the process now, but it could be the process in the future, because once something's started, we don't change the process. But it could be that then we revise, we ask for board member feedback. And then that goes to, we give you 30 days to provide feedback, and that you're not a part of the public comment, which is this longer process that occurs with traditional standards that Director Thronson will be telling you about. And so that was part of that process. So we get public, and then we have 30 days for board members to review that draft. And then their comments are then incorporated and discussed with the writing committee and brought back. So it adds about 2 months to the process. Because so what would happen? So if we schedule that out, it would look like you guys come and discuss this and what all the public feedback was, you think about it, and then you submit your own feedback, and you can do that within 30 days. That feedback's brought, and the writing committees discussed it. And so that'd be 1, 2, 3, because you'd have to have time.
Right.
So 3 months, it would put the process out 3 months.
I guess just to put it simply, it feels disrespectful to the process to get this granular on editing the standards at this point, if I were to put it simply, because it has already gone through the process with the experts and all of these different steps. So I guess just my understanding going in as a board member is that we can participate in those earlier steps, but at this point, it just feels a little disrespectful to the process to micro edit the standards, especially considering all of the steps that got us to this point.
Thank you, Member Reel. So my question is, should we try to adjust this so that we can respect the work of the writing committee and still consider these important suggested changes or amendments from the board, so that we now take these items that are being brought forward as amendments today and send those to the writing committee, and can we add that extra month? I just don't know what exactly is, how time sensitive this is, so that then the writing committee can react to and make sure that everything is still online to be this specific course, not the more in-depth course that's going to be done somewhere else. I just am seeking to understand how what we should do to proceed.
Point of order, there's a motion on the table.
Thank you, Natalie. Help me understand. I understand that. I'm just trying to seek some understanding of what would be appropriate and what would be best for Utah's children now and in the future.
we're talking process, respecting the process, there's a motion on the table.
All right, thank you. Shall we now consider this motion then and just proceed right on through with the motions, not figure out if there is a process that would be more respectful of our professionals who have spent the time? If you prefer to do that, we can just ram it right on through and ignore the process that is in place and ignore the individuals who have already spent hundreds of hours of preparing the documents that we're looking at now. I'm not in any way lessening the importance of what you are contributing. I want to have that considered. I just don't want it to be considered and thrust upon the writing committee or those who have been given the assignment without their having had an opportunity at some point to consider it. Maybe today we go ahead now and consider each of these and then send it, rather than sending it onto the board for their approval, we then send what we are recommending as a committee back to the writing committee for their consideration. I don't know. Yes, please comment.
Call the question.
All right. So we have called the question. We have a motion on the table. Could you please bring us back to that motion?
Yes, the motion on the table is to amend Strand. So the motion is, we have the first motion right here, and we have the amendment, which is this first amendment to amend the, and this is in the introduction, is that correct?
The course description.
Okay, so I'm going to say to amend the course description to state. So, and this right here is Klein amendment. And right here's where we're at. And I'll put that in black so we know that one's been brought forward. And so that would now be the vote.
All right, thank you. So
Are we voting on all of the ones that I just put forward for Strand 1 or each one individually?
That's up to the purview of the chair.
we're going to do each one individually. Thank you. So we know the original motion with Member Klein's amendment to amend the course description to state the general financial literacy GFL course encompasses standards that are essential to the development of basic financial skills, including economic reasoning, resource management, and decision-making skills. Students will learn how to manage, protect, save, spend, and invest the money they earn with the goal of becoming, spelling error, financially responsible and independent, period. This course is for juniors and seniors, is required for graduation, and can be taken online in a traditional setting or for concurrent enrollment credit. That's the motion. Would you like to speak to the motion, Member Klein?
No.
Are there any further questions or discussion of the motion? If not, will the board please vote yay or nay for that motion?
Could we scroll back up to that so we can, when you're done editing?
And then if you go into your reactions button at the bottom of your screen, Vice Chair Green, you'll find a number of responses, and we are using the green check for yay and the red X for no.
Just one moment. I'm distributing this.
Chair Booth,
Yes.
since we have 4 board members here in attendance, I believe you'll need 3 yay votes to pass a motion.
Okay,
Just so you know.
so this would not pass. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
We would still need all board members.
No
to
matter
vote.
what Vice Chair Green votes. it would not
But we
pass.
would still need the vote or an abstain from the vote for the record.
Okay. So Vice Chair Green, you could abstain or you can vote.
Yeah. Did that show up?
Yes.
It does. Thank you very much. So we have one vote in support of the amendment, Board Member Klein, and 3 votes against the amendment. Let's take the next one. Strand 1, Standard 1. Define and explain what causes it. Compare and contrast expansion, recession, and depression, and how governments manipulating the markets can inadvertently or intentionally cause them. Explain the history and role of the Federal Reserve, how its monetary and fiscal policies affect the swings in the market. Explain the law of supply and demand. Learn how a larger, healthy, free market economy is able to develop naturally when the natural ups and downs in the market are left to correct themselves by allowing the natural law of supply and demand to play out. Healthy economy has also benefited from individual participants' rational economic choices. Explain how scarcity of financial resources affects rational economic choices and how to prepare financially for times of scarcity. Is that the amendment?
These are all individual, but we can vote them on them all at once if you'd like.
Okay. I would prefer to go ahead and vote for all of those since it's all dealing with the same strand. All right. Any further questions or comments before we vote? If not, board members, please vote. So for the record, we have 2 yay votes, board members Klein and Vice Chair Green, and 2 no votes, Booth and Reel. The next item is Strand 1, Standard 2. Add to the first bullet point, e.g. socialist, communist, free market, fascist, public-private partnerships. Add third bullet point, explain by free market systems. Explain why, it might be what that means, I'm not sure. Instead of explain by.
Yes, it should be why.
Explain
Sorry.
why free market systems are superior and made America the most free and prosperous country in the world.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't have it in front of me, but that first one where it says add to first bullet point. I didn't write the whole thing there, so if you can find what it says already, first bullet point. Yeah. So does it say, did they amend it to say such as socialism and communism? Marcus, okay. That I must have been looking at a different draft because they've already incorporated that into it. So the mixed economic system, you could leave that last example. Take out the other.
Okay.
The mixed economic system. And maybe just write it such as like the others instead of in the parentheses. And yeah, might need a comma after fascist. And a period at the end. And that third bullet point is a completely new bullet point.
Okay, that one, just grammatically, we need to check that. Explain why free market systems are superior, and made is not there. And why that system, or why, and have made, or I'm not.
Okay, that works.
Okay.
That works.
Right. Any other concerns? All right, so the amendment is add to first bullet point, understand a command system such as socialism or communism, market system such as capitalism, and a mixed economic system such as fascist public-private partnerships.
Maybe it's fascism or yeah.
Or public-private partnerships. Is that good?
Better. Yep.
Add new third bullet point, explain why free market systems are superior and have made America the most free and prosperous country in the world. Okay. Is there any further discussion about this amendment? If not, let's vote. Board members. We have 3 yeas and 1 nay. So this is an example of how, as a board, we could make a judgment based on our very best knowledge and our very best thinking that would now add some teaching time to the load of the teacher. I think that the time we're adding is important. I would like for the teacher to explain why free market systems are superior and have made America the most free and prosperous country in the world. However, having voted for that, from my limited perspective, I would love for those who are in the classroom, those who are designing this course and this course as it fits in with other courses, to make certain that this, among all of the things that we have to include, that this is one of them, rather than a choice based on my very best instincts, that may not be fully informed because I am not, as my wife will tell you, the very strongest cookie in the cookie jar when it comes to personal finance and understanding how our personal finance is impacted by our free market systems.
Yeah.
So,
Chair Booth,
Yes.
I just wanted to ask one question of the committee. And again, as a staff member, this is something that you as the committee gets to decide. In writing the standards, they really try to have the level of rigor be primary in what students are knowing and being able to do. When the verb explain is there, the verb explain means a teacher is telling the students that the free market that is telling. Does that make sense? So the action on the student's part is just listening. Does that make sense? And so there would be maybe analyze the free market system, or it could be determine. It's one of those words that has that student action involved. But if the committee is wanting it to be the teacher just directing that and not having that student piece, that is because if you look at the standard, the explain, so that's a teacher product, explain this, and there's not a student part. So if we were to go back, yeah. So compare and contrast, analyze.
If we said analyze why free market systems are superior, or analyze free market systems and explain why they are, or why they have made America the most free and prosperous country in the world, would that work?
That's up to all of you. I just wanted to bring that forward. But the verbs are very important.
Yeah, it's a good. That's a friendly amendment. I mean, we can change that if you want to put analyze. I don't know who's driving.
I would just say analyze why free market systems are superior.
And explain.
From Member Real.
Dr. Norman, as I'm trying to understand this, I think the reason why I voted no on that was because I felt a little uncomfortable by saying explain why, and assuming that instead of learning why we believe that America is one of the most free and prosperous countries in the world, it's more, teaching them the again, I mean, just as a comment, I believe that this is a lot of economics and doesn't necessarily belong in this course, but generally it feels like instead of telling students what to believe, that's how this felt to me, rather than teaching them about free markets and helping them understand our free market and why it's beneficial to Americans, right? Instead of saying a statement, right, that could be considered opinion, you're actually teaching them about free markets as well as our market, which and helping them understand why it's a beneficial market, right?
I think the previous one was teaching them about that, and this was just the follow-up. Yeah,
it just feels very it doesn't feel like a learning moment. It feels like a telling moment, exactly what you were saying, Dr. Norman. And are there guidelines on these standards about statements versus learning experiences, which I might not be using the right terminology. Higher ed is very different, but is there some sort of
it's in code precedent? It's in code. In code, it says that that's to be taught as a fact, not just as a option.
Right. I just,
that the free market system
teaching students about government. Yeah. In my experience teaching students about government, I like them to get to that moment rather than telling them what to think, right? So that's what I'm trying to understand.
But there are a few things in code that are expected to be taught in that more directive way.
Chair Booth, may I answer Board Member Real's question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
In the writing committee, as you heard this morning, one of the things the writing committee gets is the board approved portrait of a graduate. And as they're moving towards those things, they look at these, especially in the area right now. So we have mastery, autonomy of purpose, and they look at these with, here's financial and economic literacy right here. So the understanding, to Board Member Klein's point, understand various governmental and economic systems and develop practical financial skills. And autonomy is a way to help students be able to learn. And so when the writing committee was developing the verbs and they were developing the actions that go along how to learn, they were thinking about communication, critical thinking and problem solving, creativity and innovation, and collaboration and teamwork. To your point is, how students go about learning it. And so that piece is really important when it comes to the writing of curriculum, being able to say, what is the action of the student as they're in this learning process? So they'll, yes, learn about this, but then the how they're learning about it. And that's why I brought forward that verb and what it means in the beginning is the action the teacher doing a direct instruction, this is, or is the action the students learning about, analyzing, comparing, and then being able to do that work. So that's your work as a committee to be able to determine which verbs you want to use. And so to your point, Board Member Reel, the writing committee used this as a foundational document, as a board approved document to help with that writing.
Thank you, Dr. Norman. That helps a lot. I'm trying to understand for future moments when these come up. So I appreciate that.
Member Klein.
So we did in the first bullet point, we did have it taught the different kinds. And then the third is just the follow-up to reassert and make sure that that lesson was discovered and learned in the first one, so that they walk away without any question in their minds, regardless of how it might have been presented, that this is where we're at. This is what's in code, that it be taught that this is the superior system. So I think we did both well in this. And I'll remember the verbs for next time.
Yeah, and Board Member Klein, this was already voted on, and I know we're giving we're giving each other grace right now, so anyone can bring something back or it can be revoted, whatever you would like. But I just wanted to bring that up as a learning experience for our committee. So right now, did you want to go back and change that word explain to a different verb, even though it's been, because you would be on the prevailing side. So a member of the prevailing side would bring it back right now and be able to say, could we reconsider that motion that just passed? And you were on the prevailing side to change that verb or to bring that vote back. Is that correct, Brian? Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's right on,
Okay,
Patty.
thank you.
I think I'll leave it the way it is, since it's covered in bullet point 1.
All right.
So we can go to the next one.
I don't feel that I have that we've quite found the solution yet. We can now continue to proceed strand by strand, but we still have not figured out how my discomfort with great ideas that have not passed through the writing committee and will not pass through the writing committee, but we'll jump over that process and go directly to the board pending our recommendation of this committee. I still don't understand how we can fix that. Where we are right now, maybe this is the only way, but I feel committed to the process. If we don't have the process right, then getting the process right, because I am not in a position as a member of this committee, even though I've got graduate degrees and I've got 40 plus years experience teaching, I am not in a position I can certainly have some great ideas and some concerns and some wordsmithing, but I can't supersede the professionals who have been doing this and who have an understanding and a perspective that I don't have for every content area. So how can we use our time most effectively? Is there a way? And if there's not, then we'll just have to proceed and muddle on through. Is there a way that we can take all of these good suggestions from Member Klein and add them to what was, because we're giving ourselves a grace period here, add them to what was submitted to the writing committee for their consideration when there was public and board feedback. And then next month, we can then bring back what they recommend with that nice little grid that they have so carefully responded to all of the feedback and why they're doing what they're doing.
These should go pretty quickly. There's just not that many. We can just get through them really quick.
But if we get through them, we still have bypassed the writing committee. Even though it may not take a lot of time, I'm not comfortable bypassing those who would understand better than
I have amendments. Are you saying that you're going to deny me the opportunity to make those amendments?
No, I was just going to suggest that perhaps those great ideas and amendments should be put into the hopper, and we should give the writing committee an opportunity to respond to those ideas. And then we have in a future meeting the opportunity to bring the amendments forward and approve them.
I would like to proceed with the amendments.
Okay.
Chair Booth.
Thank you. Yes.
I just reviewed the bylaws to see if there's any helpful provisions. And other than indicating that the committees are a little more are less formal than the board meetings, that's about it. So there's however, I think the practice has been that committee chairs such as yourself and the other committee chairs have discretion as the chair of the committee to set the agenda or I guess influence the agenda. And so I think you have some latitude here in deciding this, how to proceed if you want to postpone or delay an item or delay voting on an item.
And if I might add to that, we could also have Director Longhurst speak to whether it can, if the writing committee's been disbanded at this time, or if it could go back to the writing committee. And then as a follow-up, it was mentioned, Board Member Klein, the code that goes along with it. And the code in 53E-3-505 that you're referencing says the essentials and benefits of the free enterprise system. So if you were asking about language.
Thank you. I would like to hear from Director Talia Longhurst.
Thank you. Our writing committee has stopped their work, but I believe that they would be open to reconvening and considering additional comments.
Thank you.
At this point in time, we are at so we had this one that we just, it was a passing vote. And again, we just said anyone on the prevailing side that voted yes could bring it back, or they could not. There was the answer about what it says in code that was asked. And so if everyone's good with that, then we can move to the next one, or someone can bring it back and change that verb. Board Member Klein said she's great with the verb. No, you didn't say that. I won't add. You said that you'd prefer to proceed as is, and then we could move to the next
point of order.
motion.
Is it okay for staff to influence the vote, or or how it's done?
No, absolutely.
Okay, so you've said it like 3 or 4 times now.
Okay.
Thank you, Member Klein, for that clarification. Let's move to the next one, please. Brand 2, Standard 1.
Oh, I see a typo. It would need to say how they instead of it, or would that be correct? It's not singular, it's examples. Discuss examples of charitable giving and how it would be it or they benefit and strengthen charitable giving benefits and how, can't figure out. Discuss examples of charitable giving, or discuss how charitable giving benefits and strengthens the economy and its people. So discuss how charitable giving you could take out examples and put how. So I was doing this late in the night. Right? Discuss how charitable giving benefits and strengthens the economy and its people.
Thank you. So this is the amendment. Any discussion? Member Reel.
Yeah, member Klein, can you clarify your rationale in this one? I'm trying to understand. So the original bullet point said discuss examples as well as the pros and cons of charitable giving, and help me understand your rationale in changing it to discuss how charitable giving benefits and strengthens the economy and its people.
If we didn't have charitable giving, we would end up having a whole lot more government services, which would increase the taxes on the people. There's so much good that is done through charitable giving. It's incalculable. And if we didn't have that, our economy would suffer greatly.
I mean, I agree. I'm a big fan of charitable giving. I felt like the bullet point originally covered that in saying discuss the pros and cons, because there are cons to charitable giving, right?
Such as?
Discuss examples as well as the pros and cons of charitable giving.
We can put examples in there if we can figure out how to make it work grammatically.
Yeah, right. I just am. Okay. It just feels, I like the original bullet point. The suggestion feels a little leading.
I don't see any cons in charitable giving, so that seemed odd to me.
I'm there, but I mean, there's definitely a lot of organizations that aren't wonderful, and
there's other strands in here that talk about how to avoid fraud.
Right. More so, it just felt, if your suggestion feels more leading, and I like the more open-ended bullet point that they had originally put. So I was just trying to understand where you were going with that. Thanks.
So discuss examples of charitable giving and how, now I'm trying to go back to where I was, and how how they benefit and strengthen the economy and its people. If we want to keep examples in, we have to go back to the way it was. So discuss how charitable giving benefits and strengthens the economy and its people. We could put and the nation instead of its people. Yeah, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Further question, Member Green.
Yeah, just to clarify a little bit, even what Member Reel was saying, maybe wording it in a way that could include the teaching of how to choose a charitable donation or a way to engage in the act of charity. So there, they can say, a teacher could say, you might want to watch out for these certain themes. Here's some things to look for that are good check marks on charity. So kind of developing that maybe a little bit more.
We could
Unless-
develop it out if they wanted to go into detail, if they wanted to get more complex. I was trying to keep it on the simple level, but I think it's definitely one that
Overall, I
would be good
agree
to
with
go more.
what's written. You know, I do agree that there's no way to quantify the benefit of what charity does and how it is so positively influences America as part of helping our society as a whole. So just thinking out loud about this one.
I see you're adding some, such as assistance to those in need, tax benefits, religious worship.
No, I'm not adding, that was in the original bullet, but with your motion, it would strike that. So I'm clarifying that whole bullet.
Okay, so again, I must have been going off of a different draft because that wasn't there before. So let me, if I can see that language again.
And it's the fourth bullet,
Okay.
as far as
just
I can see.
Discuss how, discuss how charitable giving benefits and strengthens the economy and the nation, such as assistance to those in need, tax benefits, religious worship, excess production. Yeah, I would add that back in. I think it's good language. If you want to unstrike that last line.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how it fits in with your original motion.
We want to just caution one another on the difference between a standard or a strand in a standard and curriculum that will be developed, or the way that we teach that standard, the examples, the activities, the whatever, that will be developed at the local level by the teacher or by the district or charter, rather than something that we would present to them as part of the standard.
All right, and so in light of what Patty just added, board member Klein, can you see now
Brian?
the current was? Yes.
Yeah, Brian, yeah. So I'm wondering if, and we did this with Chair Hansen, is whenever there was an amendment to one of the standards, we would put what the current one was above it so that the committee could see both of those. Yeah.
Yes.
So in light of that, maybe board member Klein could explain what her specific amendment is, proposed amendment.
Discuss examples of charitable giving, such as, I would just do it as, yeah, just like if you take it from the first one, discuss examples of charitable giving, such as assistance to those in need, tax benefits, religious worship, excess production, and how these benefit and strengthen the economy and the nation.
All right, so your amendment then is what specifically?
So I would, if you take from the original, if you take out as the pros and cons of, just as the pros and cons of, take that part out. So it just says, discuss examples of charitable giving, such as assistance to those in need, tax benefits, religious worship, and excess production, and how those, oh, where did it go? What I had, how those benefit and strengthen the economy.
All right, so you want this added at the end.
Yes. As examples of charitable giving. So we need to get the of back in before charitable. Of charitable giving, such as assistance to those in need, tax benefits, religious worship, excess production, and how these benefit and strengthen the economy and the nation. So change those to these, and I think we're good.
Board Member Green, did you have another comment?
No.
Okay, your hand
Is
is
my
still
hand
up.
up? Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we now have an amendment to add to the fourth bullet point, discuss examples of charitable giving such as assistance to those in need, tax benefits, religious worship, excess production, and how these benefit and strengthen the economy and the nation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Any further questions or discussion? If not, please vote.
I had a quick comment. I guess it's just to speak to the motion. I
Please
do
go
feel like it clarifies a little bit better. I was also a little bit confused about pros and cons. So I just think this one seems more focused and targeted. That's all.
Thank you. All right, please vote. Board Member Reel. Not seeing you. Thank you. That vote does not pass. We have 2 yays. Board members Green and Klein, 2 nays. Board members Booth and Reel. Thank you. The next item. Strand, are we on Strand 5? Is that where we are?
Yes, sir.
Mm. Okay, so it currently reads, explain the purpose of cosigners and collateral when applying for a loan. The amendment is explain the purpose of cosigners and collateral when applying for a loan and the risks of cosigning. Is that correct, Member Klein?
Correct.
Board Member Green?
This might be for maybe a teacher or somebody that would be how this would look in the classroom. It would seem that they would already discuss the risks of co-signing if they're discussing what it means to co-sign. So I don't know if this is just, the assumption would be that they would teach everything aligned, that goes into co-signing. Does that need to be clarified on this level? I don't know if somebody in staff could help or give their opinion.
I would leave that to Brecken or Talia.
Yes, if you don't mind, I'll speak here. I think, yes, it would be assumed that when we're talking about the purposes of cosigners, that we would talk about kind of the risks and why a cosigner is even needed in that situation, right? So you would get into the risks when you're talking about the purposes of cosigners, but I don't see necessarily it being a negative thing to call that out as a just an extra kind of detail to what we're looking at there. So it could go, I think it would be okay either way. We would for sure cover risks when we're talking about the purpose of co-signing, though.
Thank you. Any other?
Yeah, just may I follow up with that?
Green.
So maybe in my mind, it would make more sense if we're going to include the word risk, the purpose and risks of cosigners and collateral when applying for a loan. I don't know if I would make an amendment or a motion. It seems a little redundant because but I'm making the assumption that the risk would be included in what's being taught around cosigning and collateral. So if I were to make an action item or an amendment, I would just say explain the purpose and risks of cosign of.
That's why I put it at the end.
Yeah, so I can see why you put that at the end now. Yeah, I can see why you put it at the end now. Okay, strike that.
Okay. Any other comments?
I just think it's important that we call that out because there's a lot of issues around that for adults and young people that get into a co-signing situation and don't realize the risks until it's too late. And then they have to learn the hard way.
Probably right. Probably some good emphasis might be good.
Okay, any further questions then or comments? If not, we have a motion to amend Strand 5, Standard 2 to read, explain the purpose of cosigners and collateral when applying for a loan and the risks of cosigning. Any not seeing any further questions or comments, please vote. We have 2 yeas and 2 nays. That amendment does not pass. Strand 5, Standard 4. Member Klein, would you like to explain what you're suggesting?
I just wanted to include the principle of staying debt-free as much as you can and avoid taking loans to the extent possible, or taking money from the government if you can help it, because there's always strings. And if we want to teach our children to be free and independent, they need to also know that they shouldn't go after every loan or grant or that is dangled in front of them. And there may be a better way of putting it, but
and just for the sake of consistency that we just agreed upon, in adding this standard, I can't pull one over. And so if you want me, when adding a standard, to view the strand or the standard in its entirety, would that be helpful? Or when adding a standard only? What would be most helpful to you as a committee?
I do like when I can see them back, but adding a strand makes it different, right? So yeah, right.
There's nothing to compare it to.
Right. Whatever everyone else prefers is fine for me, or whatever's easiest for you, Dr. Norman.
I think if you pull it over, at least we have that to compare right there on the screen. Or to see it in context, if not compare. So we're adding a new standard, standard 5, principle of financial freedom. He who is free of debt is free indeed. Those things you get for free are worth what they cost.
Aren't. It should be aren't. Are not instead of are. The typo.
Thank you. Board Member Green.
Did you mean me?
Board Member Green, you have, oh, your check is still on, sorry. Trying to see everybody on the screen and I'm not seeing them.
I have my hand raised if.
Please go ahead.
Okay. I really appreciate what you said, Natalie. I agree wholeheartedly. And I do wish that I would have taken this course in high school and someone would have told me not to take a credit card out in college. But I feel like that is an overall theme to all of these standards, that really responsibility and the consequences to making poor decisions in your own personal finance. And so I'm wondering if we're adding this strand, if considering what we talked about at the beginning, that they're sometimes adding too many of these strands and pieces of the standards, we won't be able to have an emphasis on other pieces. And so I'm wondering if, as reading through all of the standards, I feel like that is a theme that is consistent throughout. And if it's necessary to include another piece in this course that is already, by the way, it's just such a condensed one, it's a short course already. And I worry that we will remove emphasis from other strands if we're adding a new one.
This is just the overarching principle. And I think it's important that this principle is stated clearly. So because kids don't always connect the dots, it's something that will stick in their minds that then helps them put everything else in context. But sometimes that can be lost when we get down into the weeds, that overarching principle, and they go away with a lot of information in their head, and they end up not being able to remember any of it. Where if we can just give them one solid something to hold on to that will help guide them in all those other areas, that's probably the most beneficial piece of all. But again, we need to fix that so it says are not worth what they cost as far as strings go. But
Director Longhurst, would you like to comment or respond?
Yes, thank you. If I could get you, if I could direct you back to the draft 2 standards, back up on Strand 2, standard 1. There is, right, Strand 2, standard 1. Sorry, thanks to whoever's driving. Right here. So in draft 2, you'll see that there were some additions here, which I believe make your point. And I think the writing committee felt very strongly about making your point exactly, that there are very important things to remember about being debt-free.
Yeah, I guess to add to my comment, I felt like that was a really overarching theme. And if I took one thing from this entire standard was the responsibility of finance and the consequences of poor personal finance. So
I guess I'm not seeing anything about debt. Where's the part about debt? Staying debt free or getting out of debt? Am I missing it?
I don't know that the word debt is called out specifically, but it is included in financial planning and financial behavior.
Okay, I think that's a kind of an important thing that needs to be added somewhere.
Chair Booth, may I?
Please.
Yes, Board Member Klein, this is up to you or not, where it says it doesn't have a verb. So the standard is just principles of financial freedom. It's so the explain, discuss, understand, apply. Do we have an action that you'd like to include?
Yeah, but you could add discuss.
May I make a comment?
Please.
This one, I think this is where economics or financial debate would probably come in, because sometimes debt is utilized in business and other areas to leverage the dollar. So I think if, I were to agree on this, it would have to be defined a little bit more, because there's different types of debt. However, I understand the overall reason why we would want to include that. Obviously, consumer debt, stifles a person's ability to be debt free. They're.
Do you have language that you'd like to add that were as a friendly amendment?
Not right off the bat here. We could get some comment or feedback from staff, but I think there are different.
If we can focus in on the consumer debt, that would be a good angle.
It could be, yeah.
And avoiding debt where possible.
I do feel like standard, the one that we just reviewed here, Strand 2, Standard 1, I feel like it addresses that pretty well.
Well, the motion's on the table, so you can.
Okay, well, we've just been listening to the discussion and questions.
Yeah.
So if there
appreciate the
further
discussion.
questions, if not, we can move to voting.
But it needs to be fixed, so it says are not.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So maybe I do have a question.
Please.
Do you know of a specific area where debt is mentioned, or clarification of debt, or that it's implied? And I don't know if staff has something specific that they can pull right out.
Is debt mentioned anywhere in it?
Or a definition of debt? And this gets into probably economics and specific language that's used around this subject.
Chair, if I could respond to that. Debt is actually mentioned.
Debt.
Thank you. Debt is actually mentioned in the standards 4 times. So I'll just draw your attention to the first one that came up, Strand 5, Standard 2, discuss and describe the impact of credit and debt on personal money management. Farther down in that same standard, second bullet from the bottom, calculate how long it takes to repay debt. And then back up again in Strand 2, Standard 4, understand the primary home ownership qualifications factors such as debt to income ratio, etc. And then one last one in Strand 5, Standard 1, develop a budget that includes categories such as debt. And I'm paraphrasing there.
No avoiding debt, just debt.
If I could make one other suggestion, rather than creating another standard under Strand 5, what about moving that up as a bullet point in Strand 2, where we talk about good decision making and personal financial priorities? My only worry about creating a new standard is then we'd really need to take that back to the writing committee to further develop out the bullet points that would need to come under that.
That's fine. I'm totally fine having it added where in this other area where it fits.
And that was add to Strand 2 Standard 1, Talia.
That would be my suggestion.
Strand 2.
Thank you for help finding that.
Just technically, is he who is free of debt is free indeed? Is that in quotation marks?
No. It might, I mean, it might be.
Is it a saying?
It might be. I haven't looked
Is it
it
a
up.
quote? Yeah.
It sounds like it to me, and that's just what came to my mind. So it could be.
And then I'm just wanting board member Klein also, those things you get for free are not worth what they cost in strings. Would you like for anyone, is that the correct terminology in this area in strings, or is there a different terminology? Would you like any staff on that, or are you good with how it states it?
If someone has suggestions, I'm open to that.
Board member Green.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know that I would want to include that last sentence, those things that you get for free are not worth what they cost. I feel like that's something that could come in as a lesson plan, but not something as an actual standard. So if I were to make a motion or an amendment, what's the right word I'm supposed to use?
That's a friendly amendment.
Is that an amendment?
Or you could amend the motion.
Okay, thank you.
But
so
if a friendly amendment, I'm fine. You could just take that off.
Yeah,
So
I would just say discuss principles of financial freedom, such as he who is free of debt is free indeed.
Yes.
Or if I were to make that even more concise, I would make that discuss principles of financial. Where did it go?
The quote is actually a biblical quote and feels a little bit inappropriate to have that in a public education standards. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's from John. I remember that from seminary.
John's good book. If we were to even make it more concise, and I'm open for discussion around that, discuss principles of financial freedom. Period. But I can see where such as he who is free of debt is free indeed. I don't know.
It's just an example
of
a principle.
Could it state discuss principles of financial freedom, such as being debt free
and avoiding debt to the extent possible?
So board member Klein, if you'd like to tell us what you'd want to
discuss principles of financial freedom, such as avoiding debt to the extent possible.
Any other? So we have an amendment for Strand 1, add to Strand 1, Standard 2, discuss principles of financial freedom, such as avoiding debt to the extent possible. Any further clarification or question? If not, board members, please vote. Thank you. The next item.
That was it for me. Thank you so much for your patience working through that.
Anything else? Anyone else that has any amendments for financial literacy? All right, so did we vote and do what we needed to do in terms of now turning this over to the board?
We need a final motion, which brings us back to the original motion that was passed, which is the committee recommends that the board approves the general financial literacy standards as amended. So we would need to add in as amended right here, including any conforming technical changes needed for all standards, and then forwards them to the board. Andrew, if you can help me on that final statement, or Brian, and forwards them to the full board for final approval.
So the committee recommends that the board approves the general financial literacy standards as amended, comma, including any conforming technical changes needed for all standards, and forward to the board. For approval. That last bit, motion passes unanimously. We need to strike it. It's not part of the board motion. All right. So we have a motion for the board. The committee recommends that the board approves the general financial literacy standards as amended, including any conforming technical changes needed for all standards, and forward the standards to the board for approval. Is there we don't need a second. Are there any further questions? Anyone wants to speak to the motion?
I just have one comment. Somebody that's listening in would like it if you could announce the vote after who voted what way.
Thank you. Great. So we have the final motion. All board members, please vote. And it passes unanimously.
I think that is a great sign for this committee.
Well done.
All right, next. Our next item the recommended action is that the committee approve the draft college and career awareness standards, including any conforming technical changes needed for all standards to be released for a 30-day public comment period. So this, unlike what we've just concluded, is not passing them onto the board, but simply approving the standards that will be sent out for public comment, which will include board comment, hopefully in the next 30 days, so that everything that we would like to see considered, amendments, suggestions, will be put in by the board members and the public, so that the writing committee in the normal process will then consider all of those important comments and then bring them back to this committee with public comment and their suggestions as a writing committee based on that important input that we'll receive. Is that correct? Okay, I'll take that nod as a yes. So do I have any discussion, or do I have a motion?
I can make the motion.
Thank you, Member Klein.
I move that the committee approve the draft college and career awareness standards, including any conforming technical changes needed. Any conforming technical changes needed to for all standards be released for a 30-day public comment period.
Thank you for pushing through that. That was a little challenging as the screens were flipping all over. Is there any comment or any questions, discussion? Board Member Green? No. No. So we have a motion for the board that the committee approve the draft college and career awareness standards, including any conforming technical changes needed for all standards, and recommend that they are released for a 30-day public comment.
Sorry, I have one question that we can do after the vote as well, but I just was curious if the writing committee engages with higher education, or are you partner in developing these standards?
What staff member would like to respond?
I'd be happy to start with that again. Talia Longhurst, Director of Career and Technical Education. Higher Ed is always a partner with us in all of the work that we do. I will point out, however, that this particular course is designed to be a 7th and 8th grade middle school level course. So there isn't a direct, it's not like they're high school juniors and seniors getting ready to go directly into college, but we work very, very closely with higher ed in all of the work that we do.
Thank you, Director Longhurst.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Does that answer your question, Member Reel?
It does. Thank you.
All right. So we have the motion before us. If there's not any further discussion or questions, please vote. And the vote is unanimous. Thank you. Our next item having to do with digital literacy standards revision. Director Longhurst, can you give us a quick update on where we are, what step we're on with digital literacy?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you. So we are in the same place that we just were with college and career awareness that you just talked about. So we are in step 2. We're coming to committee to ask for approval of a 30-day public comment period. I will also just point out that digital literacy course is a middle school requirement as well. So this is a 7th and 8th grade developmentally appropriate course. And if I may just give you a little history on this course, digital literacy was moved down into the middle school level in about the 2016 timeframe. Originally, years ago, we had a requirement in high school, usually taken in the 9th, 10th grade years, for computer technology. That it was determined in about 2015-16 that was too late, that kids needed this information earlier. And so the requirements were revised, and what used to be known as computer technology was completely revamped and moved into the 7th, 8th grade area, and is now called digital literacy. I will also point out, if you don't mind, that while many of our students have some abilities in computing and in digital literacy, not every student, and in fact, what we hear from teachers who are teaching this course is many students don't come into 7th and 8th grade being truly digital literate. And so, the ability to use a phone or an iPad is very different than computing and learning about digital literacy. And that is the purpose of this course. And that's why you will see the standards written as they are. And we'd be happy to answer any other questions that you have.
Member Reel.
I have a question about how we would define digital literacy. Like what is the definition of, digital literacy?
And at this point, I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm going to tag in our specialist over this particular course. Her name is Ashley Higgs. She's an educational specialist up in CTE. Ashley.
Good morning, board. Like Talia said, my name is Ashley Higgs. I'm the CTE specialist that oversees digital literacy. Great question, board member Real. How we define digital literacy is that anyone in the world is a consumer with electronic devices. They aren't creators. And so looking at that group of anyone that's using an electronic device, digital literacy is making sure that that person is digitally responsible when using those devices, whether it's on social media, whether it's writing a paper in plagiarism or things along those lines, as well as basic troubleshooting that they might have to have, like for a prime example, board member Booth today getting into Zoom. So just that is the overall encompassing of what a student or a person would be digitally literate.
That's great.
Does that answer your question? Thank
Yeah,
you.
and can I just, as background while we're going through this, know the complementary courses or courses leading up, or based on this piece, is there a course following that follows this that's the next level and the one prior, just to understand?
So as I work on updating the digital literacy standards, I work with the high school teachers, specifically business and marketing and computer science, because there is that high school graduation requirement for digital studies. And so I usually get feedback from them saying, what is it that students are coming to you with that are lacking? Just like what I do with my middle school teachers when kids are coming from the elementary, far as being on devices and things like that. And I look into that and figure out what it is that we can focus on in this course to hopefully make them better prepared for when they get to those high school courses.
Awesome. That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. So what today our task is to approve the standards and release those standards for a 30-day public comment. And the board and the public will have that 30 days to put in all of their comments, amendments, ideas, concerns, questions, and the writing committee will then bring back their recommendations for our consideration in the March Standards and Assessment Committee for approval. So do I have a motion?
One point of order.
Yes.
So as part of a committee, we are not allowed to say which committee it's brought back to, even though it would make sense. That's up to board leadership. So the correct thing would be the standards we brought back to a committee in March for approval. And most likely it's going to come to standards, but just in case agendas differ, there is sometimes a point where the leadership will change those. So they've asked us not to put which committee it comes back to.
Thank you for that clarification, Deputy Superintendent. Thank you. So I would entertain a motion.
I can make that motion if you want.
Go ahead, Member Klein. Thank you.
All right. I move the committee approve the draft digital literacy standards, including any conforming technical changes needed for all standards, and recommend that they are released for a 30-day public comment. Standards will be brought back to committee in March for approval.
Thank you.
That is.
Thank you for creating that motion on the fly. You did an excellent job. Are there any questions? Is there any discussion? If not, seeing none, members, please vote. Thank you, and the vote is unanimous. Our next item of business.
Can we take a 5-minute break?
Absolutely. We
Thank
will
you.
now take a 5-minute break and be right back at it.
Chair Booth, can I call you really quick?
Of course. Thank
Okay.
you. Committee members, let's begin to gather. Let's see, we have Board Member Reel and Board Member Klein, Board Member Green, and myself. Andrea's here and Patty. Is Sarah here ready to move forward?
Yes.
Yes, you are. Great. Okay, well, we appreciate everyone rejoining our work today. We're going to make a note of the fact that action 1.6, action item 1.6, elementary social studies curriculum interagency agreement was passed in the full board meeting yesterday on January 12th, 2023. No action is needed. So we'll now be moving to action item number 1.7, P12 English Language Arts Standards. And I'd like to turn the time over to Sarah Wiebke and Naomi Watkins to give us the background and setting for where we're at on this review process and to present to us that which they have completed and what which they would like us to consider today. Sarah Wiebke.
Thank you, Board Chair. Sarah Wiebke, P12 Literacy Coordinator. Regarding the English Language Arts Standards revision, the committee has now completed step 9, which was to gather feedback from the public and then revise the standards based on said feedback. With that being said, the writing committee is asking you as the Standards and Assessment Committee to allow for us to move to step 10, which would be to allow these drafts to be shared with the full board so that they have a 30-day opportunity to review and then send any feedback that they have.
Chair, if I may.
Please.
Yeah, Sarah, this would be the first time this committee is revising core content areas. So could you take them through I know it will take just a minute, but the understanding of the 10-step process and then what that looked like for this committee, where the input of the board is, where the input of, the writing committee, who needs to be on the committees. And I know that will take just a minute, but I think it'll help give a really firm understanding. Is that okay, Chair?
We'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem. So a couple years ago, the review was triggered that it was time for the ELA, meaning the English Language Arts Standards were ready for review. And so at that time, the board approved that the standards be sent to a review committee. The review committee consists of parents as well, which are specifically brought to us by the House and the Senate. And so with those parents, and then also a handful of LEA representatives. At that time, they gave specific recommendations as to what could be overarchingly changed within these set of standards. And then at that time, the board reviewed those and determined, yes, you can continue on with the process. So at that time, then a writing committee was created, and that committee consists of a diverse group of people, meaning we have LEA representatives, literacy coaches, literacy specialists, teachers, professors, a wide range of people on that committee. It's a fairly large committee. And so over several months, actually a year, they went ahead and made adjustments to that. Then that draft was then released to the public for 90 days. And at that time, during those 90 days, the public could give any feedback in a couple different ways, because we had public sessions where we actually attended in person and gathered the feedback in that manner. We also had a survey that went out to the public, and that is how the majority of people chose to provide feedback. And so then the committee had been working for several months to go ahead and adjust specifically based on that public feedback. And so they've been doing that for a little bit now. And so they are done with that part and are coming to you in hopes that you will let us then allow for time for the full board to review, which of course would include all of you, for the next 30 days so that you all can give us some feedback and have that opportunity since you haven't had a chance yet.
Great. Any questions from board members about what they're asking for at this point? So we will have a busy month ahead with English language standards for the full board to bring their input forward. And of course, for the digital literacy and financial literacy that we've already put out there so that we can give the input that we need to be giving as board members. Board Member Klein.
So are we not making amendments today then on this?
No, we are not. We are, I believe, my understanding is that we're now approving what they have done up to this point with the public comment that was given to them. And certainly some board members probably already submitted things as part of that 90-day public comment period. So they've been able to react to some of that. We're today, my understanding is approving that what they have now presented to us is going to be forwarded to the full board for full board input and amendments and changes that they would recommend come back to the writing committee after 30 days. And then it would be considered after they have a chance to consider that by the board, not 90 days, 30 days. Is that
Can we
correct?
see is it possible to see the action that was on the agenda? Do you have that? We can just see. I was under the impression we were able to make amendments today. So it's this the same as the other two that we just did?
Recommended action. The Standards and Assessment Committee forwards the revised draft standards, including any conforming technical changes needed for all standards, to the full board for a 30-day review per step 9 of the standard revision process. Yeah, that's it. So no amendments today is my understanding. Is that correct? So let's hear first of all from Bronson.
Thank you, Board Chair Booth. Jennifer Bronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. And yes, so this step is just basically saying, are the standards ready to go to the full board for their review? And then they will submit their recommendations to staff. Staff will take that to writing committee. And so I know Board Member Earl had already sent some amendments to Sarah and Naomi that will be included in this 30-day feedback period. And then we will bring back how the writing committee responded to those. And that will give board members another opportunity to give more amendments as they see fit. But the next step really will be coming back to committee to say, here's those revisions. Do you want us to have a special board meeting? Or do you think this can be handled in a regular board meeting to make those final acceptance of the standards? So the amendments are not done in committee in that way. They're done through this board review process. And then ultimately those amendments, this committee will decide if they want to do their own kind of round of amendments together and then go to the full board where more amendments can be done. Or if you want to skip doing committee amendments and do all the amendments together on the full board. It really is just up to you if you want to do the amendments potentially twice or once. And when we get to that step, we can talk about it. But today is really just saying, are we good to send this on to the board so that they get their 30 days to review and give us comments?
Okay, so in the board meeting yesterday, we voted on releasing something for 30-day, right? So it's going to go to the board again for the board to do that as well, like the one we did yesterday.
Well, no, that was releasing it to the board was yesterday determined that we were ready to release it to the public. This has already been released to the public. So when we bring something to the board we're going to recommend that the board have 30 days for the board only to give their feedback to what has already been now adjusted based on the public feedback. Is that correct, Dr. Thronson?
But you said we could bring it back to this committee first after the 30 days before sending it on to the full board, correct?
Yeah, so staff will bring back the revised, what we think is like the final based on the board's suggestions, and then committee will, this committee, well, depending on which committee it goes to, generally it comes here, would then decide if it needs to be further amended and do some of that work in committee before sending it on to full board, or say, let's just do all the amendments in full board. As historically we've seen, we do amendments here and then we end up doing the same amendments later. So
Okay.
you also have that decision.
So that's going to be a couple of months down the road because we have to wait for a month before the board votes to release it for 30 days for them to comment.
And that's what I'm checking on right now in our process. If it
So the 30 days doesn't start today. It's not from now until next board meeting. It's starting next month into that second month.
Pending the board's approval of it's time for us to now have 30 days, right?
You got it.
And
so this could take another 3 months, 4 months to complete the process.
That's correct. We're anticipating summer of 2023.
Sarah, what did you have a comment?
I think Jennifer already answered, but just that if you voted today to release it to the full board, then the 30 days would begin. But I think Jennifer had already answered that.
Oh, it would begin today.
No, it has to go to the full board still, Sarah. So in 7A and 7.
Oh, I don't see that in the steps.
Well, because when you go to committee can't charge the board until it goes to full board. The actions have to go to the board for approval from a committee. In my understanding.
So today we would vote and send a recommendation to the board to release it to themselves for 30 days to be for their input and direction. Is that correct?
I think that is where we're going from today. I think that is a good distinction. I'm glad that question came up. I appreciate it. And that understanding. As I'm looking and I'm sharing the timeline right here, it says step 9, which we're on, revised drafted standards submitted, and then 10, so it was July to January, and then it looks like February. So February, I think that would be, I'm not sure what February meeting date is. So that would be the released date, because the board would say yes in February. So then the month of February is when the full board is giving that feedback as well, right? Jennifer, or is the full board in February, because they're going to approve in the February meeting if this committee approves. So the committee approves it to go to full board for board comment. And then in the February meeting, let's say it's February 3rd. I'm not sure what that date is. Then it would be February 3rd to March 3rd for everyone to submit. And then would it go back to the writing committee?
In March, yes.
In March. Okay, so then it goes back to the writing committee in March. Yep, so it is just as outlined. So thank you for that clarifying question.
And then after writing committee, at whatever point they have finished their work in response to the board, they would bring it back to not the board, but to this committee to see if we now are ready to take their responses onto the full board, or whether we want to spend some more time in the committee after the writing committee has had their chance to respond to us based on response from the board. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, and that's how it differs from the non-core areas. Is in the non-core areas, remember, as we were discussing, well then what role is the writing committee after the board, the committee or the board's given feedback, and there's not that step in there. And so that's the difference between the non-core and the core subject areas, is this does give that chance for the full board feedback, and then for it to go to the writing committee and then to come back again.
Okay, good. So I think we understand what we're doing. So I would, do we want to take a look at what has already been dealt with by the writing committee based on public comment before we discuss as a committee as to whether we're ready to open it up to the full board for their comment, or do we want to just entertain a motion now that the full board begin in February for a month to have give their feedback? Dr. Thronson.
I'm gonna correct myself. I'm going, if possible, I'm gonna put up. Can I share my screen? I want to go back to the board's approved revision process, and it appears to allow the committee just to say yes, and then the 30 days starts. And I think Sarah's under the impression of. So I want to see what you all want to agree or disagree to that, because generally we say committee, board for everything. But the way this process is, it basically says you all are queuing this, and then the 30 days starts, because you'll see it says month 18, month 18. We do a little prototype of like how many months this is take to get through. So month 18 is what we're really in month 24 or something right now. Maybe we're in 18. But
can you make it bigger?
Yes. Thank you for asking. I always, now we have to be able to see the other part. But you're in step 9. Step 9 says the committee determines whether to forward this on to the board for the 30-day review. Then they would have 30 days to do that, which would put you past next board meeting. It wouldn't come in February back. It would come back in March for you all to kind of see that final addition to make the call that happens in step 11. So this is basically where we're at from this board process that's been approved. You all would be queuing it today, and then we would actually go until March. So, but there'd be 30 days from whenever we send it to board members, they would have 30 days to review that. So I wanted to clarify because I was mistaken, and this is the board process. So it really would start the review as soon as staff gets it to board members for 30 days. And we would be back to you in March to say, here's the addition we have. How would you like to proceed? Either full board, special session, those kinds of discussions.
So the full board doesn't have to vote to release it.
Not the way that this is written. That is correct.
So this is, and what we have before us is the board approved review process. Is that correct?
Yes, this is the board approved process. This is the old one. Let me be clear about that. That is posted on our website from July of 2020. But the current one is different, but because ELA was already happening, the board stays with the old process in the current standards, and then any new standards will go under the new process.
Okay, and I just have one more point of clarification. So if we follow this and we agreed to send it to the board for board input for the next 30 days, we would communicate in some way with the full board that the committee has released it to them and they now have 30 days and they would have until March or February, whatever, whenever the board, 30 days, not the board meeting. So mid-February from whenever that letter is sent out or that communication is sent out. And then it would go back to the writing committee after that 30 days input for I don't know how long, and then it would come back to us to determine whether we want to discuss what the writing committee response has been to board feedback, or whether we are ready to send it directly back to the full board for now their consideration and approval. Is that correct?
100%.
Okay. Any questions from anybody else? I think my simple mind understands what it is we're trying to do. Okay, so would it be helpful for us to review what has already come back and how the writing committee has responded to the public feedback that is now being brought to us prior to our releasing it to the full board for their feedback? Does anyone want to respond to whether that might be helpful or whether we can just proceed to a motion? Were you planning to present any besides having made it available in backup, were you planning to make any presentation of changes or just your
Yeah.
consideration of what has already happened now that it's coming back to us in preparation to go to the full board?
Chair, if I may, I'm gonna.
Please
Sarah,
do.
Kate, yeah, and Naomi have done an incredible job. And maybe this is a good time for us to look at what's in backup, just as an example of what staff traditionally puts in there for a core subject area. And so maybe we won't go through all of everything on the documents, but I'm going to turn the time back over to Sarah, and she's going to tell me what page to go to just to show the process about horizontal and vertical alignment, how we get the public comment in, and each one of those is in your backup. So when you get another core content area that comes through, you'll be able to know that there is a consistency with how we show all of that to you. Would that be helpful?
I think it would be great. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah.
Great, thank you. Yes, Sarah Whippy again, preschool through 12th grade literacy coordinator. So I think the document that Patty is showing right now is probably, in my opinion, the most useful to look at. And so I'm so glad you brought this one up first, Patty. Thank you. It's like you knew. And so this document specifically takes all of the public feedback, which you'll notice is a lot. And so with that, some of the public feedback was like, these are great, I love them. And of course, that's awesome to hear, but not super actionable for us, other than saying we like it. And so the ones that were actionable, we took and put in this table format so that you could see what the current draft said, what the actual feedback from the public stated. We just copied and pasted it over into that middle column. And then you the revised standard. And you'll notice anything italicized, like on the first one right here, we have a preschool age 3 speaking and listening standard 1. During vertical alignment, the committee revised the standard. So the rationale for that was sort of added. Since there's nothing in the middle, you were probably wondering, why did it change? So we wanted to add that just as some clarity for you all to be thinking about why a change could have occurred. The reason for vertical alignment changes is because once the public gives feedback, sometimes they give feedback on just 1 or 2 standards, but then the alignment is off on the grades nearest to those. And so because of that, we want to make sure that whatever change was made in one standard, it's then adjusted in the standards closest to it to make sure that it still flows in a vertical alignment. And so I'll give a specific example of a change that could have occurred. So if someone said, oh, I like the words of first sound instead of initial sound or beginning sound, and we changed it in one standard, but then the standards on either side said first or beginning, then the alignment would be a little bit off with that vocabulary. And so we wanted to make sure that didn't happen in our standards. And so that's why the committee determined to go ahead and do another vertical alignment after that, after all the changes from the public were made, just to make sure we weren't missing anything. And so really kudos to the committee for making that determination and making sure that we have that alignment throughout. So I really think that speaks to how important they feel like these standards really are and how seriously they take the public feedback.
And Sarah, I put up for you the vertical alignment, what it looks like for the committee to be able to see that.
Yes, fantastic. So we did provide the draft standards in 2 different options. One is sort of just the normal way that they look, but in that way you can't really see the vertical alignment across grades. And so the committee felt like this second document that Patty is showing right now would really be a better way to show you that vertical alignment across the different grade levels, looking at the ones that are closest to it. And then, as I was saying, this is really the big one that has the introduction, which isn't very long, and then it has all of the standards listed out, starting with preschool age 3, going all the way through grade 12. And so it's just a sort of like a long list of standards, basically, with the introductions included. In addition to that, the other pieces provided were the public comment, which was the longest document, and it's a little cumbersome to look through. And so the committee, that's why the committee decided it might be best to organize it. So that's why that table that Dr. Norman showed first was really the best option. And so we did want to organize that just for everyone to have a cleaner, easier look at that, because reading through this can be a little bit overwhelming. At least that's how the committee felt when we first looked at it. And then in addition to that, of course, is just the memo and then just the timeline that we had up earlier.
Thank you. So with all of that public feedback and in the third column showing how the writing committee reacted to the public comment or made suggestions, we now have a document that we are ready to pass on to the full board for their input. And is that document just that list of standards that you showed with the introduction? Is that what we would be forwarding to the or providing as backup as the starting place for the board to react to the standards? This one, yes.
Yes.
Okay, are there any questions from board members? Okay, so we have a motion that I would be happy to entertain if anyone's ready to make it.
I'll make the motion.
Prior
Please
to
do.
that, I'm wondering if we need to put a date in the motion so that it's very clear when the start is. Just going back to board member Klein's question in the beginning of when does it start, so it's very clear to the public and everyone else when this is.
I think that's great. So when do you think we could, does anything have to go back to board leadership? Would they be the ones to release it to the board? Is this committee empowered to send this to the board with instructions that you have 30 days from this date or from receipt to give us your feedback? Or I'm not sure how it works with the overall board structure and communicating with the board in a situation like this.
May I speak to that?
Absolutely, Dr. Thronson.
Thanks. So given the board approved process, you do have the authority to just say, board, it is time. And our staff can send that through just to the emails for board members. I believe Sarah's probably ready, knowing her today, to be able to do that. So we can get the 30 days queuing starting probably tomorrow to allow people, you're all in board meeting today, and make that end date be with 30 days. I'm just doing some checking on the calendar to give that time for the 30 days to happen. Do we want the exact date here? Looks like we do. So one moment. Sarah, feel free to beat me.
And it's being typed in right now.
So it'd be February 13th because we have 31 days in January, and we really could say beginning January 14th. It'll probably go out today, but that would be 30 days with the 31st in there.
Valentine's, what a great day to finish our work.
And is that a work day? I just want to make sure. Okay. And do we want to say close of day, or is it close at 5 p.m.? So would it then be February 15th that it was looked at?
It should really be February 13th because there's 31 days in February. And then I would tell people till, the 13th midnight, like it's still the 13th, because Sarah's not going to look at it at 5 o'clock at night, I would hope. And therefore we might as well wait until that, give people the full day to be able to get that done.
Sounds good. Are there any concerns or suggestions from board members as to that you would want anything else to happen in lieu of what we just discussed? Okay, I think this is great. So would anyone like to make the motion? Vice Chair Green.
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion for the board. The committee recommends that the board receive the draft P through 12 English Language Arts standards, including any conforming technical changes needed for all standards, for a 30-day review beginning January 14th and ending February 13th, end of day, per step 9 of the standards revision process.
Thank you. We have a motion. Would you like to speak to the motion? No. Are there any concerns or questions regarding this motion? If not, we have a motion that the committee recommends that the board receive the draft P12 English Language Arts Standards, including any conforming technical changes needed for all standards for a 30-day review beginning January 14th and ending February 13th, end of day, per step 9 of the standards revision process. Seeing no further questions or comments, please vote. And the vote is unanimous. Great. All right. And I think that concludes the work of our committee for today. Am I missing something? I can't imagine that it's 11:31 and that we've concluded. Thanks to all who've worked so hard to prepare and to be prepared. And thanks for your patience with us as we try to figure out how to work together. I'm grateful for all of our board members, particularly for the hard work they put into being prepared for these meetings and coming with great suggestions. It's my greatest desire that we find a process, understand the process, and that we work that process so that everyone's voice is heard in a respectful and appropriate manner, and that we take full advantage of the excellent resources that surround us as we move these important standards and assessment decisions forward to the full board. We have a great committee and great staff members, and certainly appreciate the perspectives of our new board members as they're just in their first day of contributing. And we look forward to a lot of really great contributions, and appreciate your patience with us as we try to become more proficient at doing the work and accomplishing the work that we need to accomplish. Thanks. A shout out to our staff members, to Brian Quisenberry, and all of the staff who have worked hard with Dr. Norman to be prepared. So thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.